A young widow sits trembling in the back of a military briefing room, her voice barely audible as she tries to explain what really happened during the ambush that claimed her husband's life. The base commander dismisses her account with a wave of his hand. "Mrs. Chen, grief makes people imagine things. Your husband died a hero, but let's not turn tragedy into fantasy." The room fills with uncomfortable murmurs as fellow military wives look away in embarrassment. But when classified footage is finally declassified and the truth emerges, a different story unfolds. One that will shake the foundations of everything they thought they knew. From which corner of the world are you witnessing this powerful moment today? If stories where courage transcends loss inspire you, hit that subscribe button for more moments where truth honors the fallen in ways no one expected. The sterile conference room at Fort Richardson, Alaska, carried the weight of 1,000 difficult conversations between military families and commanding officers who delivered news that changed lives forever. Afternoon light filtered through government-issued blinds, casting shadows across a table where Captain Lisa Chen sat, with the rigid posture of someone fighting to maintain composure under unbearable circumstances. Her black dress uniform was impeccable, her hair pulled back in regulation style, but her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the water glass that had remained untouched throughout the meeting. Lisa Chen was 26 years old, a decorated Army intelligence officer whose analytical mind and steady performance under pressure had earned her respect throughout her 5-year military career. She had married Staff Sergeant David Chen 3 years earlier, a union that combined her strategic intelligence background with his special operations expertise in a partnership that seemed designed for long-term military service. Now, 6 weeks after David's death in Afghanistan, Lisa found herself fighting a different kind of battle, one where her professional credibility was being challenged by the very institution she had served with distinction. Colonel Marcus Webb presided over the meeting with the uncomfortable authority of someone who had delivered similar briefings to dozens of military families over his 20-year career. His expression combined professional sympathy with barely concealed impatience, suggesting he viewed Lisa's presence as a necessary formality rather than a genuine attempt to understand the circumstances surrounding her husband's death. Webb's chest displayed ribbons from multiple deployments, but his rear echelon assignments had kept him removed from the frontline realities that Lisa was trying to describe. Also present were Major Patricia Williams from Family Readiness Services, whose role was ostensibly to provide support to grieving military families, and Captain James Morrison, a public affairs officer whose attendance suggested that the Army was concerned about how this particular casualty might be portrayed to the media and the public. The presence of these additional personnel created an atmosphere more reminiscent of damage control than genuine information sharing. "Mrs. Chen," Colonel Webb began, using her civilian title rather than her military rank in a subtle indication of how he viewed her current status. "I understand that losing your husband has been traumatic, and I want to assure you that the Army shares your grief. Staff Sergeant Chen died, serving his country with honor, and his sacrifice will not be forgotten." Lisa straightened in her chair, her intelligence training helping her recognize the carefully scripted language of institutional deflection. "Sir, with respect, I'm not here as a grieving widow seeking comfort. I'm here as an intelligence officer who has reviewed the after-action reports and believes there are significant discrepancies between the official narrative and what actually occurred during the ambush." Webb's expression shifted to barely concealed annoyance. "Mrs. Chen, I understand your desire to make sense of a senseless tragedy, but the investigation into your husband's death has been thorough and complete. Second-guessing our findings won't bring him back or change what happened." "I'm not second-guessing, sir. I'm presenting analysis based on intelligence training and access to classified information that suggests the official report contains factual errors." Major Williams leaned forward with practiced concern. "Lisa, grief can affect our perception of events and make us see patterns or inconsistencies that aren't actually there. It's completely normal to want to find different explanations when we lose someone we love." Lisa's jaw tightened at the condescending tone, but she maintained her professional composure. "Major, my analysis is based on signals intelligence data, enemy communications intercepts, and tactical movement patterns that are inconsistent with the reported sequence of events. This isn't about grief, it's about accuracy. Captain Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his presence becoming more relevant as the conversation moved beyond family counseling toward potential challenges to official Army narratives. Mrs. Chen, I think everyone in this room understands that you're dealing with tremendous loss, but publicly questioning official investigations could be harmful to military morale and families of other fallen soldiers. The implicit threat in Morrison's words was clear, but Lisa had anticipated this approach. Her intelligence background had taught her to recognize institutional pressure tactics, and she had prepared for exactly this kind of response. Sir, I'm not questioning the investigation publicly. I'm requesting that classified information be reviewed by appropriate personnel who can verify or disprove my analysis. If I'm wrong, the official narrative stands. If I'm right, then we owe it to David and the other soldiers involved to correct the record. Colonel Webb's patience was clearly wearing thin. Mrs. Chen, you're asking us to reopen a closed investigation based on your amateur analysis of intelligence data that you may have misinterpreted due to personal emotional investment in the outcome. Amateur analysis? Lisa's voice carried a note of steel that hadn't been present before. Sir, I hold a top-secret/SCI clearance. I've completed advanced intelligence analysis training, and I've successfully identified enemy patterns that contributed to mission success in 3 previous deployments. My analysis is an amateur, and my emotional state doesn't invalidate my professional capabilities. The room fell silent as Lisa's credentials were laid out explicitly, forcing the assembled officers to confront the fact that they were dismissing the professional analysis of a qualified intelligence officer based on assumptions about her emotional state rather than the merit of her work. Major Williams attempted to redirect the conversation. Lisa, no one is questioning your intelligence training, but analyzing your own husband's death is different from routine intelligence work. The emotional component makes objective analysis extremely difficult. With respect, Major, I've analyzed intelligence data about operations where personal friends were killed or wounded. Professional intelligence officers are trained to maintain objectivity regardless of personal investment. That's the foundation of effective analysis. Colonel Webb decided to end the discussion with administrative authority. Mrs. Chen, the investigation into Staff Sergeant Chen's death is closed. The findings have been reviewed at multiple levels of command and determined to be accurate and complete. Your request to reopen the investigation is denied. Lisa had expected this response, but she had prepared one final approach. Sir, I'm not requesting that you reopen the investigation. I'm requesting that my analysis be forwarded to Defense Intelligence Agency personnel who specialize in operational pattern analysis. If they determine my findings have merit, they can make recommendations through appropriate channels. Webb's expression showed that he recognized Lisa was maneuvering around his authority rather than accepting his dismissal of her concerns. Mrs. Chen, I think this meeting has run its course. You've been heard, your concerns have been noted, and the Army's position has been explained. I suggest you focus on healing and moving forward rather than continuing to pursue this matter. As the meeting concluded, Lisa gathered her materials with the same methodical precision that had characterized her intelligence work. She had expected resistance, but the dismissive tone and refusal to consider her analysis had confirmed her suspicions that institutional interests were taking precedence over accurate reporting. Major Williams approached her as the other officers left the room. Lisa, I know this is difficult, but sometimes accepting tragedy is part of the healing process. David wouldn't want you to torture yourself trying to find different explanations for what happened. Lisa's response was quiet but firm. Major, David would want the truth to be told accurately, regardless of how that truth affects my emotional recovery or the Army's public relations concerns. That evening, Lisa sat in her small apartment near the base, surrounded by intelligence reports, communication intercepts, and tactical analyses that she had been reviewing obsessively since David's death. Her dining room table had been converted into a makeshift intelligence workspace, with documents arranged in the systematic fashion she had learned during her training. The discrepancies she had identified were significant and undeniable. Enemy communication patterns suggested advanced knowledge of the patrol route that had led to the ambush. Tactical movement data indicated coordination between multiple insurgent groups that exceeded anything described in the official reports. Most importantly, Signals intelligence showed David's unit had identified the threat and requested extraction support that was denied due to supposed resource limitations. But there was something else in the classified intercepts, something that changed the entire narrative of what had happened during those final minutes of the ambush. Lisa picked up her secure phone and dialed a number she had memorized but never used. The connection went through multiple security protocols before a voice answered with simple identification: Analysis Division. This is Captain Chen, Army Intelligence. I need to speak with someone about operational pattern analysis for a classified incident in Afghanistan. The conversation that followed was brief but significant. Lisa explained her concerns about the official investigation and her request to have her analysis reviewed by specialists who could provide independent verification. The response was professional but non-committal. Her materials would be reviewed, and she would be contacted if additional information was needed. 3 weeks passed with no response from the Defense Intelligence Agency. Lisa continued her normal duties at Fort Richardson, but her colleagues had begun treating her differently. Word had spread about her challenge to the official investigation of her husband's death, and the reaction was mixed. Some fellow intelligence officers respected her dedication to analytical accuracy, while others viewed her actions as inappropriate grief-driven behavior that reflected poorly on the profession. Colonel Webb called Lisa into his office on a Thursday morning with the kind of summons that suggested official displeasure. When she arrived, his expression confirmed that her inquiry to the DIA had generated the kind of attention he had wanted to avoid. Captain Chen, he began, using her military rank for the first time since David's death. I've received inquiries from Washington about intelligence analysis related to your husband's incident. I thought we had resolved this matter. Lisa maintained her professional bearing. Sir, I followed appropriate channels for intelligence review. My analysis raised questions that warrant professional examination. Your analysis has created questions about Army operations that are now requiring answers from personnel far above both of our pay grades. This is exactly the kind of disruption I warned you about. Sir, if my analysis is incorrect, professional review will confirm that. If it's correct, then the disruption is justified by the need for accurate reporting. Webb's frustration was evident. Captain, you're an intelligence officer, not an investigator. Your job is to analyze enemy patterns, not to second-guess command decisions or operational reports. My job is to provide accurate intelligence analysis regardless of whether that analysis supports or challenges existing narratives. That's the foundation of effective intelligence work. Before Webb could respond, his phone rang with the distinctive tone that indicated a high-priority call. After a brief conversation filled with "yes, sir" responses, he hung up and looked at Lisa with an expression that combined anger and resignation. Captain Chen, you're being temporarily reassigned to the Pentagon for consultations with Defense Intelligence Agency personnel. Your flight leaves tomorrow morning. Lisa felt a mixture of vindication and apprehension. Her analysis was being taken seriously at the highest levels, but she also understood that challenging institutional narratives carried professional risks that could affect her entire military career. The next morning, Lisa boarded a military transport flight to Washington with a single briefcase containing copies of all her analysis and supporting documentation. During the 5-hour flight, she reviewed her materials one final time, knowing that she would soon be presenting her findings to intelligence professionals whose expertise far exceeded her own. The Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency offices were located in sections of the building that most personnel never saw, behind security checkpoints that required special clearances and specific authorization. Lisa was met by a civilian analyst whose credentials and bearing suggested extensive experience in operational intelligence review. Captain Chen, I'm Dr. Sarah Martinez, Senior Analyst for Combat Operations Review. I've examined your materials, and I have some questions about your methodology and conclusions. The conversation that followed was the first professional intelligence discussion Lisa had experienced since David's death. Dr. Martinez approached her analysis with the objective professionalism that Lisa had hoped to find during her meeting at Fort Richardson. Your pattern analysis is sophisticated and thorough, Martinez said after reviewing Lisa's work. The discrepancies you've identified are significant and warrant further investigation. However, there are aspects of this incident that involve classified capabilities and operations that you may not be aware of. Lisa felt a combination of validation and concern. Doctor, are you saying my analysis is correct but incomplete? I'm saying your analysis has identified genuine inconsistencies that require explanation. The question is whether those inconsistencies indicate errors in reporting or activities that weren't included in the official narrative for security reasons. Dr. Martinez presented Lisa with additional classified materials that had been declassified specifically for this review. The documents contained intelligence reports and operational details that had been withheld from the standard investigation due to their sensitive nature. As Lisa reviewed the new information, her understanding of what had happened during David's final mission began to change dramatically. The official narrative wasn't wrong, it was incomplete. David and his unit hadn't simply been victims of an ambush. They had been conducting a classified operation that had succeeded beyond all expectations, but at a cost that the Army had been unwilling to acknowledge publicly. The signals intelligence that Lisa had analyzed showed enemy communications indicating that David's unit had eliminated a high-value target whose death had disrupted a major terrorist operation. The tactical movement patterns she had identified revealed that the ambush was a desperate attempt by enemy forces to recover intelligence materials that David's team had captured. Most importantly, the intercepts showed that David hadn't died as a victim of enemy fire. In the final minutes of the engagement, he had deliberately exposed himself to draw enemy attention away from wounded teammates, allowing them to be evacuated while he provided covering fire from an exposed position. Your husband's actions during those final minutes saved the lives of 4 other soldiers and preserved intelligence materials that prevented a terrorist attack on civilian targets, Dr. Martinez explained. The official report couldn't include these details because acknowledging the success of the operation would have compromised ongoing intelligence activities. Lisa absorbed this information with the analytical detachment that had served her throughout her intelligence career, but the emotional impact was overwhelming. David hadn't just died serving his country. He had died completing a mission that saved both military and civilian lives, and his sacrifice had been deliberately minimized to protect classified operations. Why wasn't I told about this? Lisa asked. I have the clearance level to receive this information. Because your emotional involvement in the case raised concerns about operational security. There was worry that grief might affect your judgment about what information could be safely shared or discussed. The irony wasn't lost on Lisa. Her grief had been used to justify withholding information that would have answered her questions and eliminated her need to conduct her own analysis. The Army's concern about her emotional state had created exactly the kind of persistent inquiry they had hoped to avoid. Dr. Martinez continued her briefing with additional details about David's unit's classified mission and its strategic importance. The operation had been part of a larger intelligence effort that had successfully disrupted multiple terrorist networks and prevented attacks that could have killed hundreds of civilians. Captain Chen, your analysis was not only correct, it was remarkably sophisticated for someone working without access to complete operational data. Your identification of pattern discrepancies led us to realize that our compartmentalization of information was creating gaps that could be exploited by hostile intelligence services. The validation was professional and complete, but it raised new questions about how Lisa's findings would be handled. Doctor, what happens now? Does the official report get corrected? Do the families of the other soldiers involved get told the truth about what their husbands accomplished? That decision will be made at levels above both of our authorities. But I can tell you that your analysis has already contributed to changes in how we handle family notifications and information sharing for classified operations. Lisa returned to Fort Richardson 3 days later with a classification of information that prevented her from discussing most of what she had learned in Washington. Colonel Webb's attitude toward her had changed completely, his earlier dismissiveness replaced by cautious respect for someone who had proven her professional capabilities at the highest levels of military intelligence. Captain Chen, he said during their first meeting after her return, I've been informed that your analysis contributed to significant operational insights at the national level. I want to apologize for not taking your concerns more seriously initially. Lisa's response was professional but pointed. Sir, the analysis should have been taken seriously because of its merits, not because higher authorities eventually validated it. Intelligence work requires objectivity regardless of the source. Webb nodded, accepting the implicit criticism. You're absolutely right. I allowed assumptions about your emotional state to influence my professional judgment. That was an error that I'll work to avoid in the future. 2 months after her Pentagon consultation, Lisa received notification that she was being considered for reassignment to Defense Intelligence Agency operations. Recognition of her analytical capabilities and her handling of a sensitive situation that had initially been viewed as problematic grief behavior. But there was another development that would change everything. 6 months after David's death, Lisa received a phone call from the White House military office requesting her presence at a classified ceremony that would provide appropriate recognition for Staff Sergeant Chen's service and sacrifice. The ceremony took place in the East Room of the White House, attended by senior military officials, intelligence personnel, and families of soldiers whose classified service was finally being acknowledged publicly. Lisa wore her dress uniform with David's combat awards, which she had been authorized to display as a recognition of their shared service. President Harrison entered the room with the dignity and gravity appropriate for a ceremony honoring classified military service. His remarks were brief but meaningful, acknowledging the sacrifices made by military families whose service couldn't always be publicly recognized. Today we honor soldiers who served with distinction in operations that protected American lives and interests in ways that couldn't be immediately acknowledged, the president said. Their families have borne the burden of incomplete information and private grief, trusting that their loved one's sacrifice would eventually be recognized appropriately. When David's name was called, Lisa approached the president with the bearing of a professional military officer rather than a grieving widow. The president placed the Medal of Honor around her neck, not as David's survivor, but as the intelligence officer whose analysis had revealed the true scope of his heroic actions. Captain Chen, the president said quietly, your husband's actions saved the lives of his teammates and prevented a terrorist attack that could have killed hundreds of civilians. Your own service as an intelligence officer ensured that his sacrifice was properly understood and recognized. The ceremony concluded with Lisa holding the Medal of Honor that represented both David's battlefield heroism and her own professional dedication to truth and analytical accuracy. The recognition was simultaneously personal and professional, honoring both their individual service and their partnership as military professionals. In the months that followed, Lisa accepted the assignment to Defense Intelligence Agency operations, where her experience with operational pattern analysis and family notification procedures contributed to improved policies for handling classified casualty situations. Her work helped develop protocols that balanced operational security requirements with families' need for accurate information about their loved one's service. Lisa also became an unofficial advocate for military widows whose spouses had died in classified operations, helping them navigate the complex intersection of grief, security requirements, and the desire for truth about their husband's service. Her experience had taught her that professional competence and emotional healing weren't mutually exclusive. Both required dedication to accuracy and truth. 1 year after David's death, Lisa was promoted to major and assigned as a senior analyst for Combat Operations Review. Her first major project involved developing new protocols for family notification that would provide more complete information while maintaining necessary security classifications. During a conference on military family support services, Lisa was asked to speak about her experience advocating for accurate information about classified casualties. Her presentation was professional and analytical, but it also conveyed the personal understanding that came from living through the intersection of military service, loss, and institutional challenges. The most important lesson I learned, she told the assembled military family support personnel, is that grief and professional competence can coexist. Military families deserve accurate information about their loved one's service, and military institutions have an obligation to provide that information within appropriate security constraints. She continued, dismissing family concerns as grief-driven behavior disrespects both the families and the fallen soldiers whose service deserves accurate recognition. Professional analysis should be evaluated based on its merits, regardless of the analyst's personal relationship to the subject matter. The audience included both military personnel and civilian family support specialists, many of whom had never considered that military spouses might possess professional expertise relevant to understanding their loved one's service. Lisa's presentation challenged assumptions about grief, competence, and the capabilities of military families. 2 years after receiving the Medal of Honor on David's behalf, Lisa was selected for promotion to lieutenant colonel and assignment as Deputy Director of Combat Operations Analysis at the Defense Intelligence Agency. Her career had not only survived her challenge to institutional authority, it had been enhanced by her demonstration of analytical integrity under the most difficult personal circumstances. During her promotion ceremony, Lisa was approached by a young Army captain whose husband had recently been killed in a classified operation. The captain had questions about the official investigation and concerns about discrepancies in the reported timeline of events. "Ma'am," the captain said quietly, "I've heard about your experience, and I wonder if you could provide guidance about how to pursue questions about my husband's death without damaging my career." Lisa's advice was based on hard-earned experience. "Captain, document your analysis thoroughly, use appropriate channels, and remember that professional competence isn't invalidated by personal loss. If your analysis has merit, persist until it receives appropriate review." The conversation reminded Lisa of how much had changed since her initial meeting with Colonel Webb. The institutional resistance she had encountered was being replaced by recognition that military families often possessed professional expertise relevant to understanding their loved one's service. 3 years after David's death, Lisa received a letter from one of the soldiers whose life he had saved during the classified operation. The soldier, now medically retired, had been authorized to contact her as part of a Defense Department initiative to provide families with more complete information about classified service. "Ma'am," the letter read, "I wanted you to know that your husband's actions during our final mission saved my life and the lives of 3 other soldiers. His courage under fire was extraordinary, and his sacrifice prevented a terrorist attack that could have killed hundreds of innocent people. You should know that he died as a hero in every sense of the word." The letter provided details about David's actions that had been withheld for security reasons, painting a complete picture of his service and sacrifice that validated every aspect of Lisa's analysis. More importantly, it confirmed that her persistence in seeking truth had been justified by the significance of what had actually occurred during that final mission. Lisa framed the letter and placed it next to the Medal of Honor in her home office, 2 symbols of how professional dedication and personal loss could combine to produce both recognition and institutional change. Her experience had proven that grief and competence weren't mutually exclusive, and that military families deserved both emotional support and professional respect. On the 4th anniversary of David's death, Lisa was invited to speak at the Army War College about intelligence analysis and family notification procedures. Her presentation included both technical analysis of her methodology and personal insights about the intersection of military service, loss, and institutional responsibility. "The most important lesson from my experience," she told the assembled officers, "is that professional competence doesn't end with personal loss. Military spouses often possess expertise that can contribute to understanding their loved one's service, and institutions should recognize that expertise rather than dismissing it as grief-driven behavior." Her presentation concluded with a challenge to the audience. "We owe it to our fallen soldiers and their families to ensure that heroism is recognized accurately, regardless of classification requirements or institutional convenience. Truth and honor require the same professional dedication, whether we're analyzing enemy capabilities or our own operations." Have you ever had your professional expertise dismissed because of personal circumstances? Sometimes the greatest service we can provide to those we've lost is insisting that their sacrifice be understood and recognized accurately. Lisa Chen proved that grief and competence can coexist, and that persistent dedication to truth ultimately honors both the fallen and those who survive to tell their stories. From which part of the world are you watching this powerful story? If tales of courage that transcends loss and professional integrity that demands recognition inspire you, subscribe for more moments where truth emerges through dedication and love manifests as service to something greater than ourselves.